is actually a part of a larger office that I operate. Here at Mayo Clinic, of course, most of our funding comes from the NIH. So my office is really the strategic funding office. We really focus on NIH awards, probably 90% comes from there. But there are other entities as well, and we knew that about 7 we understood with the economy and the sequestration that we needed to look at other funding sources. And we had a number of individual investigators who had medical research funding from DOD, but we didn't really have a Mayo Clinic presence as a whole reaching DOD. And we realized it was really important to do that because while you can go as an individual investigator to a grant opportunity, just like you would at NSF or NIH, developing a relationship with DOD is really important and valuable. Program officers tend to come back to people that they know and trust at DOD. So we decided at that time, this was back in 2013, that we needed a separate unit. So within the funding office, we started the Department of Defense Medical Research Office, and that was a combination of several people. Our sponsor projects office and some of our medical directors were leading this effort then to reach out to DOD and get an understanding of what it is that they want, but also very important, who are all of these various entities involved that we could call describing DOD, because money is scattered across the DOD enterprise. And what I'll say straight up with regard to that funding is that I'll just mention DOD as sort of that traditional funding source, but then we'll also segue over to what's known as Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, and then Faye will take that further into the peer-reviewed medical research program. So I just wanted to set the stage so you understand that in terms of medical research, DOD is actually extremely viable. Of course, the funding is NIH, but there's a great deal of interest in research, and of course, for DOD's specific interests, but talk about CDMRP, which is a little bit broader scope. So Faye, if you want to advance the next. So one of the things that I want to say about DOD right up front, and I'm going to talk about more of traditional DOD that we think of first, is that you've got Army, Navy, Air Force. Really their research as addressing a particular need. So in contrast, you go to NIH with a great idea and they say, hey, this looks like a great idea, we'll give it some money. At DOD, it's really more about the fact that they have a problem and they need it solved. And in particular, they want it solved. So when we say requirements driven, that is about something that they've identified as a gap, and they want that gap filled. And that's where we come back to this notion of then when they find people that can actually perform for them, they like to come back to them over and over again. However, the first thing I'll say about even DOD is that this first bullet point is it's not just about the soldier on the field. So when you go to DOD websites and you see all these people in uniform with guns and jumping on helicopters, that is one constituent group that they're concerned with. But there's a much broader group as well. Under the moniker of the Defense Health Agency, DHA, that organization, which is sort of the umbrella organization over DOD healthcare, they actually have a constituent group of 10,000 beneficiaries, or 10 million, actually it's about 12 million beneficiaries today, because that includes family members as well. They operate TRICARE. So their concerns are much broader than just that 21-year-old who's out somewhere in Iraq. They also have a number of people who are back in the States in active duty, but maybe they're now in their 40s and they're nearing the completion of retirement. That injury that they got when they were 20 years old is now a chronic condition. It's a knee condition or a shoulder condition. And pretty soon they're going to go into the VA system and they're going to become a beneficiary there too. And there is that relationship between DOD and VA that is a concern. This element that they like a great deal is this idea of partnerships, because interested in that outcome. What are you going to make for them? So one of the things to keep in mind is that as I hear refer to AMC or an academic medical center or an academic center in your case, we do the research, we come up with great ideas, we make prototypes, but we don't carry something, and that's a big concern, and that's an issue with they want to know who's going to bring it to market and actually put it on a shelf somewhere and make it absolutely viable. So their concept of isn't just, can you come up with a prototype? It's how is it going to get from here to there? So I know ASU, Mayo Clinic too, we have strong tech transfer offices, and that's really important, and that's a big asset that is valuable in the eyes of DOD. So when we're talking to them and we're putting together proposals, talking about that tech transfer element, and you'll see that when you look at the CDMRP awards as well, that technology transfer is crucial, and being able to address that is considered extremely important. When I say channels of oversight, what I'm talking about is that you really have to understand, again, what is the funding source looking for, and also what's in their portfolio. So will they articulate what they want solved? But it's also important to look at what they're doing in that effort. So you can speak to your ideal place as a program officer, somebody who's going to tell you, well, we've got a lot of money dedicated into this particular portfolio right now. Maybe that's not a key area to them in a certain way, or you point your proposal at a different constituency group, they're going to take an interest. So here again, it's really valuable to understand what are their interests, but also what have they been doing for the last 6 years, because they're not always necessarily going to fund something because they've got a full bucket already. They're already funding something. So again, very different from the way NIH looks at things. Multiple channels of interest. At DOD, you've got Army, you've got Air Force, you've got Naval Research. They all operate quite independently. So if you have an idea that is, you think, oh, combat casualty care at Army, they're going to love this, they might, you might also discover that Special Operations Command has a really strong interest in something like that. Navy has an interest, Air Force has its own set of interests. They all might be parties who have an interest. And you can look for that in these sources called broad agency announcements. And Faye, I don't know if you post those online at your institution, but that's where you get those military units or the service agencies posting opportunities. So it's in those BAs that about what their interests are, and you'll see from one to the other, Air Force to Navy to Army, some of those topics are very similar. So keep in mind that you may have some different opportunities there across that board. And then lastly about this slide is that DOD gets involved in your research, and that's, so to speak, in the sense that they're not so much, when they put out those funding opportunities and they talk about that problem that they've got, they keep tabs on what you're doing very closely. In most situations, it's a quarterly report rather than an annual report. They're very concerned about how you're spending your money and if you're spending on time. So they like to hear that you're keeping up with the timeline that you proposed in the first place, and they will scrutinize that as part of your proposal. In CDMRP and also in DOD funding, you put together something called a statement of work, which is simply your task list of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And that program officer is going to use that as their document for the next 3 to 5 years, working with you to keep track of what you're doing and getting it done on time. So there's a lot of involvement, and of course, especially right from the top, making sure you understand what it is they want done. And of course, the end of that is the outcome. What are you going to make for them? And when you talk back to the proposal concept, it's very much about promising, or at least telling and predicting, that there's going to be some kind of a solution achievable at the end of this research. So when will we go to clinical trial? When will we get into a product development space? How will we get into that product development space? Is that through our own technology or our own tech transfer efforts, our licensing agreements? Do we have an industry partner? Do I have a small company that I'm going to pass this off to? It's really, again, about not just discovery and translation, but it's also about that development and that product outcome. Lastly, just about that outcome topic is that you cannot simply the product solely for DOD. They don't see that as viable in the marketplace. So it's also important to be able to articulate that viability or product feasibility is really something that can also go on a shelf in a pharmacy at Target, or it can go on a shelf in an emergency at your EMT down the street. So that's also an aspect of viability that's important to them. So keep a couple of those things in mind. So we could go to the next slide. So again, just a little bit of a reiteration of what I was trying to get at is that unlike NIH, where it's like science, okay, we think it's great, we'll give you some money for 3 years, 5 years, and maybe you can get another renewal and another renewal and another renewal and keep on going. Here, they really want to know, what do you do for us? We've got a problem. Can you help us with this part? Very particular problem. Secondly, of course, does it have scientific merit? And something about the scientific merit, especially when you're talking to the Army issue or the Air Force issue, look at the military literature. There's a great deal of funding that's going on within the DOD, intramural funding for its own laboratories, and there are publications around. I was just looking online earlier. I saw a site with 5 free online military journals. There are hundreds of military journals with some aspect of medical research involved in them, whether it's burn or simulation or Gulf War illness. There's literature about that in the military literature, and you have to be aware of what that is and be able to speak to that. No different than if you're looking at NIH study section and you want to make sure that you're not contradicting one of the top reviewers on study section. You want to make sure that you're also speaking to what's already out there in the military literature and that it's known and that you know what they're talking about. There too, of high value to the DOD is, are you partnering with any DOD facilities, research labs? Are you partnering with any of the VA hospitals for your patient populations that you're reaching out to? They very favor partnerships. So you'll be when you're looking at even CDMRP, they use this as part of their bedrock concept. They have additional dollars available for the partner, what they call the partnering option. So program at PRMRP, you would have additional dollars for a partner. And when you come along with a VA partner or another DOD partner, those have a higher success rate than those that do not have a partnering PI option. It isn't absolutely necessary, but they certainly believe that it isn't just one institution coming along that work. It's a multidisciplinary approach, and oftentimes it's 2 or more institutions. And again, what they're also very concerned with at the end of that tunnel is, who is this going to help? How quickly is it going to help them? And how is it going to change things for that constituent group? And we can talk about that in the CDMRP more articulately, because there they actually have consumer reviewers. But even in these military-focused grants, you're interested, you have to speak to the concept of how is it to make the patient's life better? Is it going to not only be a solution for them, but might it save them money in their insurance costs? Might it save care in its insurance payments? Fewer visits to the doctor, less arduous treatment strategy. Those are all important things because those reviewers are interested. They do have a specific consideration for kinds of results as well. So it's not just the science, it's how is it going to get there? And then also when. So we'll hop on to the next slide, please. And I want to credit Faye for introducing this into the PowerPoint. George Heilmeyer was the director of DARPA back in the mid-70s, and he came up with this very simple but very pertinent list of questions that you really ought to ask when you're putting together any kind of proposal like this, but especially for DARPA or for the DOD. And I'll just highlight 2 of these bullet points that I think are really vitally important to address that doesn't always get touched on when you're thinking about this from, say, an NSF or NIH perspective. Who cares? So again, is it about who are you going to serve with this? Who's going to get the treatment? Who's going to get the solution? If they're going to benefit from this? Is all of the military medical treatment facilities going to benefit from your solution? Are you going to get it out there into that community where it's going to change practice or be a drug or a device that's delivered into their hands and can actually change the way things are done? And then the second to last bullet point, how long will it take? We don't often talk about that because it takes the traditional 17 years to get from concept to drug development. But DOD doesn't think that way. They want to know how quickly are you going to get us that solution. So being able to speak to that, how, even if you're at the very early stage research, when will you get to the animal model? When will you get to human subjects treatment and testing? And when will you get it to your tech transfer office? I think those are all things that need to be said and are questions that are asked in the proposal. So you'll see that in the RFAs that come at you. And so next slide, please. So quickly, we're just talking about here, as I said, you have these stovepiped, as they call them, within DOD. These organizations all under the DOD roof in medical research. They air its own medical research. The Office of Research has its medicine research. Army has the largest bolus of money because, of course, their traditional primary interest is in that comprehensive care. So the infantry soldier who is losing a limb, has a blunt force trauma, is suffering from TBI, that's where most of that medical research dollars go. And yet again, you're also going to have Special Operations Command, which may have some very particular interests in those same types of injuries and have specific side for that problem too, because it is a specific in their area. So, and again, down at the bottom there, you have broad agency announcements. That's where you see those dollars come out. I know we're going through a whole new SAM.gov reissue that your Sponsored Projects Office probably already has in place, but it's how to apply to those grants is that SAM.gov link down there. So this is where I'll step away. This is just DOD service branches, and now we'll segue over to this other channel of funding that we'll concentrate on more, called congressionally directed medical research, which is, it's more or less what it says it is. This is money that Congress set aside for specific disease topic areas. This started back in the early 1990s, and the reason it exists is because patient advocacy groups came to Congress people and said, will you, so the first group that came there was related to breast cancer research. And back in, I think, 1992 or 4, you had $15 set aside for breast cancer research, $15 million. The reason it was done that way is because they said, we're not going to give it to NIH. NIH is going to take it, they'll do bench research, we won't see it, we won't hear from them for 17 years. We're going to give it to DOD and said, you run this process, because what we want is high risk, high reward, clinically translational outcomes that will result in something sooner. And so you can say that's largely the idea. If you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I do, but this doesn't apply, it actually does. What you simply have to do is make sure, like I said earlier, help them understand how you're going to get to translation. So, but again, the gist here is largely toward clinical research, but you can go across that board. So they took all this money and it just continued to grow year after year, and they handed it to DOD and they sent it off to the agency, what used to be called, and you probably still call it often, MRMC, Military Research and Materiel Command, is now MRDC, Medical Research and Development Command. They're the folks who just run the program. Now, I will add that as we look to the next slide, so we can go there, DOD also puts its money into topics under this, essentially a mechanism. So it's an agency that handles these dollars for Congress, but DOD also puts its own money into some programs as well. So as you can see here, this is just the nice rainbow of all of these projects that have consistently grown over time. It just gets bigger. It's over $1 billion today. And topic one after another, new topic year after year after year, tick-borne disease, spinal cord injury. It just continues to grow in its breadth of topic areas as well. So this really is an area where, unlike what I was just saying at DOD, and we have very particular defense-related issues, we also now are talking about cancer research, broad spectrum research, because again, it's Congress's money, it came from constituent groups. This is very much the national population focus. But, and we'll come to this soon, there's also a military aspect to this money. So we'll, in a few seconds, or Faye will go there, but we could just jump to the next slide. So just to give you a sense of where this money is all headed, this is the outlay for 2020. We've already got some funding opportunities in the CDMRP pipeline that have opened up. In particular, we'll be talking about peer-reviewed medical research. So you have all these disease topics. If you look to that right column, you've got peer-reviewed Alzheimer's, peer-reviewed cancer. Under that, you've got 14 topics, such as, I think brain cancer research is there. I can't tell you all the 14, but so that's another group to look at. You're in the cancer field, there's 14 topics there. Peer-reviewed medical research in a minute, there's 44 different topics all under that roof. The opportunity. And we can go on to the next. And so Faye, do you want to go from here and get into PRMRP?
I guess it depends on what this next is. Yeah. Thank you, John. Fantastic. So I will say that I am not speaking as an authority in any way, shape, or form. So if I get it wrong, I will correct it. If you want to call me out, that's completely fine. I'm okay with that. I have a vague understanding of the program. So John, the same rule applies to you. Is that, so peer reviewed is, again, where you have a scientific peer group, right, to look at quality of science. So it's slightly different, but the mission remains the same. And everything that John just said, completely. So the topics that came out, luckily, so the Heilmeyer, just to give credit where credit is due, was actually generated by their Global Security Initiatives group, because we did a DOD multidisciplinary university research initiative kickoff earlier this week, so it's DOD week, and that's applicable. I just want to point out that actually the Institute for Humanities Research has like a little flyer with the Heilmeyers on it outside their center, because they are appropriate for pretty much anything you want to write. So Heilmeyer is just a great exercise to get behind. These are the topics that came out last week. It's all a blur. Last week. And so these are, yeah, I won't say any more about that. These are the topics. So I'm going to reference Tara and Quinn just vaguely, hand wavy, but Tara I've asked to speak up extemporaneously about her experience last year as needed. For those of you who don't know me online, I'm Faye Farmer, and my office won't be supporting proposals in this mechanism, but we do have an interest in helping, trying to find a way to help proposals become more competitive by submission. So we'll get more into that, but generally speaking, it's on you. So this is what happened last year, was that we were experimenting. So our performance was pretty miserable for CDMRP and PRMP, RP. So last year we had the help of McAllister and Quinn, which was a consulting agency that had very deep expertise in the program, and we were paying them out of university funds, so we could use them however we wanted. We created this cohort approach where we actually kicked off, did a little webinar, and then brought people in as a cohort. Fairly successful. Sean was, I don't think you were, I'm a little vague on who was in the cohort in retrospect, but I am claiming both of the awards that we got, as is my right. So Dr. Youngstead and Dr. Che are in the audience now, and we'll talk at the end of the presentation. Dr. Wardener didn't win this round, but not from lack of trying and a really good concept, but he also went to NHRS. So I wanted him to speak a little bit more about the benefits of that attendance. So we got through this cohort, and out of that, the McAllister and Quinn people really focused on that military relevance and all of the proposal edits that they did. A couple of were in engineering, so benefited from Tara Morley's expertise as a military spouse and proposal manager. So if you're in engineering, know that that's a really valuable resource you can use going forward. Of course, she's got another job, lots of jobs, so be respectful of that. But we effectively doubled our award rate last year. So I call the cohort a success. And really, I was just looking for one award, and we got two. So that's nice. However, it wasn't enough to convince the powers that be to continue with additional consulting. So I'm trying again make an argument for next year to put into my budget that we could do consulting. Another group has approached us, and they were extremely expensive. So we weren't, the overhead on what we won would have maybe cost what they would ask. So just so you know, I am on your side. I am trying to work something so that we can have that expertise come in to work with our faculty. This year is going to be not consultant driven. Next year, probably, if I get my way. So there's solicitations that dropped last week. These are the programs. Now, I have to say, last year, I got hopelessly lost in all of these. So the crosswalk that Tara sent out to those who are registered that she has in her hand, you should have in your email. If you don't have it, I'll send it as part of this recording, is really helpful because it really just breaks it down. So all I did was pull out the and kind of run through these. We had several people go after each category last year, and I can put you into contact with them and their experience. So Discovery Award is the smaller of them. They're 200,000. Very innovative, very new, right? So we did have a couple people go over to Discovery, not awarded. Focus program, a little bit more successful. And Dr. Shea, which one did you? Investigator, last one. Okay. So I don't remember helping a focus program proposal, so I could be wrong with that. But again, it's a little bit more expansive because you have 7.2 million for direct costs and then a maximum period of 4 years. So something to note, just to go back, is that full professor level above, it's really just investing in a really concentrated effort. And the pre-proposal is required for both of these because they're very extensive. Investigator initiated, which is Dr. Che's, is essentially there, so I'll give you a minute. And a period of performance for 4 years. And he can go into more detail. Again, pre-proposal is required. They don't want to waste your time or theirs. Technology therapeutic, and I don't think anybody went after this last year as well, but something to think about. So I've included it here, less familiarity. We have some experience to point to in the other categories. Again, pre-proposal required. So I kind of mapped it out just to make sure that you knew what you were looking at if you decided to prepare a submission. The pre-proposal stage is helpful, and hopefully the faculty can reflect a little bit more on how helpful that was. In our cohort, we actually looked at the pre-application and bolstered a lot of that because it is a competitive down select. So if we come up with a crowdsource option for people who can contribute their in a topic or an area or experience in the DOD, then it's feasible to think that we could improve the success of our pre-proposals being advanced and invited to full application. Again, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Discovery, again, smaller dollar, more applications, just an LOI that's due, and then there's a quick turnaround for the actual application. So one thing that John did bring up is that it is really incumbent upon the faculty who are interested in pursuing to know what the portfolio looks like. I cannot stress that enough. You have to know what DOD has funded in the past. You do have to know what they value in much, and again, John said this, so I'm restating, but NIH will not have funded this in the past because the objectives are totally different for the DOD. You can go web search, award search. It's all actually fairly easy to access. You don't want to duplicate. They will come back and say, Dr. XYZ has done this already and found this to be a non-competitive, research avenue, and they will tell you that. And it's better that you don't look like you don't know what's going on. And then so it's an initial scientific peer review and then programmatic review. That's important because you're going to fit into a portfolio that's run by a program officer. And that person will want to see, again, John said this is the connection to the DOD, the connection to the VA, the connection to some kind of population related to you. The strength of that connection should be strong and feasible and relevant. And that's part of the application. So I haven't broken down the application because I wanted to just introduce the concept, and I want to spend the time talking to the people who've gone through this process last year. But I do, I also stole this from DOD Murray because you guys don't have topic chiefs, but they do. So you can go and visit DC and talk to program officers. In this, it's a little bit murky, and maybe I can point to John to say, what is the success rate of reaching out to DOD program officers? We do have funding to support you to go visit program officers. So I definitely wanted to put that out for you. And it's just this application. They meet you halfway. They fund 50% of the visit, I think. So there it is. There's no limit. There's a limit of 1 trips per fiscal year on a no match basis. Oh, okay. Yeah, 50% match from college and additional trips. Oh, okay. So they'll pay for 1 trip. And that's the requirement. There's 2 weeks turnaround. So if you're looking at next cycle, this might be a more viable option for you. Okay. And then the MHSRS is a late August, huge conference in Florida. And I really encourage you to think about attending in that, submitting an abstract. The abstracts close the 25th of March. We'll ask Flores to talk about that experience, but it's face-to-face interaction with program officers and managers and people in the DOD. And it is that networking connection. So if I had one goal from this is to encourage you to go there. Because if you want to develop this DOD portfolio, this is probably the easiest way to do it. Take a bunch of white papers, take a bunch of cards, go and meet, and you'll meet all the consultants who want to work with us. And then tell them that they are too overpriced.
Right, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
We talked about this conference, and you said maybe you can apply for the funding part that you suggested previously. One of the things that is in that part is that it states that it cannot be used for conferences. So is there any way that you can sort of breach a gap there? Because all those officers are likely to be there. So I think for us, it's much more interesting to go there and present instead of, do a nice trip to Washington and then then we do double the money, right? So is there any option that you can help us there?
How about, I promise you, if you guys submit an abstract, this goes for everybody online. If you submit an abstract and are selected, then you let me know and I will put in an offer to the powers that be to pay for the. So that's a standing offer. I have enough time and you have enough time to write an abstract and get responses, and I can put that forward. I can't guarantee it, but I'm not paid for it, so maybe I could make a case. It is important to me, and I see the value, so I'm willing to run it up the flagpole for you. But I'm also not in a position of huge power. Thanks, Forrest. Okay, so with that, and the time that we have left, I want to introduce Dr. Che, Dr. Youngstead, and Dr. Wardenar, who just asked the question, to speak a little bit about their experience in this process. Dr. Youngstead has a kind of a weird, actually all of them are really unique experiences, so I'm just going to let you just what you did. Dr. Che, I have you first on the list, if it's okay. And then I would also ask that you kind of speak loudly and point at the ceiling.
Okay. My name is Junseok Che. I'm electrical engineering. I submitted towards the investigator initiative, something like that. and I took advantage of partner PI option. Initially, I was thinking to have the partner PI option with VA hospital because I was told from this consultant that it is nice to have that the DOD or VA personnel on the team. And that didn't work out well because of a lot of reasons. But at the end, I took a partner PI with another medical institution in Phoenix, and that turns out well. I almost agree everything what John said, including this heavy involvement of the progress and reports. You're gonna be surprised at how meticulously I need to articulate about the milestones of each individual aims, including military version of IA Cook. So I propose some animal study. In general cases like NSF and NIH funding, all I need to do is go through a institutional review board, and I get the approval for IA Cook to do animal study. That's not the case for military case. We have to bring this IA Cook approved by the institution and apply for IA Cook of that office version. That takes about two to 3 months. And the reason why I want to highlight that one is my statement of work is literally almost like half-month break of individual milestones, including animal study. And the animal study is scheduled based upon IA Cook at ASU. That's not the case. So they have to get the IA Cook of us at least 2 to 3 months prior to the budget release. Meaning, even if they approve, the budget release takes time and so forth and so forth. So you know, it's not like I gotta throw all kinds of milestones in. It has to be really, really thoughtful process of putting those milestones, and as well as a report. High risk, high reward. This topic I submitted 6 times prior to this program to NSF and NIH and philanthropy. And obviously all of got rejected. And everybody were excited about the idea. For instance, NIH, my significance evaluation score were always 1, 2. Nevertheless, the approach and other factors didn't fly, and that's why it was rejected. Luckily, CDMRP program picked my proposal up, and I'm very happy to have the funding going forward. The last piece was this partnership PI. So overall, I'm happy with having partnership PI, but it requires a heavy administrative involvement. It's not subcontract, but it's not sub-award. It's not collaborative research type of award. Partnership PI's deliverables are actually on prime, meaning my partnership PI at the Phoenix local hospital, whatever he claimed for deliverables actually be responsibility to this program. So, and also all kinds of budget things are rather involved and hectic. So if you are going for partnership PI for the CDMRP program, it would be good to have it, but be prepared to do much work on your side.
If you don't mind, I'll just jump in a little bit. Again, Tara Morley, I'm proposal manager. I work with Dr. Che on the proposal preparation. Just something to think about with the investigator-initiated awards. Several component documents went into that submission, and each of them need to be written and targeted to a different audience. There's a relevance to military health document, there's a lay abstract, there's a technical abstract, there's an impact document. So just something to think about should you advance to the full proposal is that you'll want to spend a lot of time giving consideration and farming those out for feedback from different groups to make sure that you're sort of hitting the right spin on those. I mean, a lay abstract should be read by anybody, you know, outside of the research community, just a general Joe, and they should leave that document with an understanding of what you're trying to do, whereas your technical document is going to be written to and can come at a different level of detail. So that was something we spent a lot of time on. And then with particular focus on that relevance to military health, obviously being a military focused program, if you're targeting the service member angle, if you're targeting the dependent angle, if you have any access or can get through the literature or military numbers and data as far as, you know, what body of people would be impacted by your study. We spent a lot of time on that angle, and Dr. Che was able to make a case that, you know, a significant percentage of people could potentially be impacted by this project being awarded. So that was something else we played around with a lot to make sure that relevance to military health was lasered in on. And you should ask for help on those documents. They do advise, you know, don't go throwing around military terms if you don't really know what they mean. You know, you don't want to confuse a naval term with an Army term. Ask for help on those fronts, because you do, if you're speaking to that audience, you want to make sure you're kind of using their language appropriately, but not jargony.
Regarding that one, so I said I applied 6 times in the past before this one. So almost all my figures and description and everything were ready, even before I submitted to this program. However, because of this all other required document, almost a month, maybe more than a month and a half of my life was fully focused on writing those other documents and prepared. So if you try to make this one within your target, I think you gotta be prepared a little early. Rather than, you know what, I'll just put everything together within the next 3 weeks. I think that's going to be very, very.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Quick question. Just a broad question. One is, I've been to the CDMRP website and we look for awards and things like that. And some of the information is there. I've not done that in the recent past. It's not, I guess, it was not as user-friendly, I guess, as the NIH reporter. I was wondering if you have some resources, because it didn't seem like, you know, there was a lot of information on the awards that were. So I was wondering if you can maybe, for all of us, at least give us some links that might be there to different programs, programmatically, whatever might be available. Of course, it has to be public. And then coming to the points of the different documents required, is that the support you're saying that is not available this year?
Correct. They actually weren't available last year. It's an engineering. Tara took the initiative, and it's based on her workload and what she can do for you. We did not have that experience. My job last year was just to manage the cohort, so you're on your own for this one. Unfortunately,
even with those documents.
Yeah, well, you'll have to negotiate that in your school unit and then the dean's office. In engineering, you have other resources unavailable in other schools, units, and colleges. So I'm not at liberty to assign those resources. My current office is not supporting the CDMRP effort, except for right now. We'll get on the links. I don't know what else we
had
can
some,
do about it.
I mean, they would be dated a year out, but I remember we did have how many awards have been made in each topic area in the recent past.
I think it was in here, which I had it. We can find it, because I saw it today, but I don't know how old it is. Okay, Dr.
I'm just
Jens.
wondering if you're looking in the right places.
Yeah, we can look. Okay, Dr. Jens.
I, investigator-initiated thing was a special forces target or RFA, whatever. The consultants were super. They really. I'm basing a lot of my conclusions on, you know, the assumption that what they told me really helped. You know, never know, because you know you get grants rejected. This one week. although a complaint is that we got sort of in August indication that it's going to be funded, but still no notice of award even now. We've pestered them a few times. I've heard that happens sometimes with the DOD, and then I hear that there's still IRB issues at the Department of Defense that we're going to have to deal with. So the feedback they gave me, consultants, was really having a connection with the DOD or the VA. So a couple of times they said something like, it was, I found a little disconcerting that, you know, that they're going to assume you're just looking to do a grant. You know, you want to avoid that impression. So my first inclination was, well, don't offer this grant to non-DOD people. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to say that we can do what you're funding. So, but we did, in response to that, we I collaborated with some of the Naval Health Research Center, San Diego, and also our statistician is a veteran, and we really emphasize that a lot. So I think that helped. You know, they want to make sure we made a good case, very explicitly why we chose our measures. You know, and even though we really we can't have our subjects be military, we made the case of how it really would apply military. So I never found a program officer, and so that's been a source of frustration. I'm trying to get another breast cancer RFA, a response to a breast cancer RFA, and I've tried a few times to contact the DOD, and they basically said, well, all the information you need is in that RFA. So I'd love to be able to speak to a program officer. I did go to the military conference too. But yeah, I guess those are the main things. You know, be very explicit about, you know, your measures and how is this going to benefit the military and civilians.
I didn't realize you had another comment, so I apologize.
Actually, that's the question I've had as well. Is there, and this is about, you know, whether we are looking at the right places. That's basically what it is about. So what resources might exist for us to find out about program managers for different programs? It's not been explicit to me, and I'm glad to, you know, in some way glad to learn that that's not a singular experience.
The DOD is a machine. So I don't know if you want to comment on it, but we were recently talking about how there's cycles for activity for the DOD and the research, so that you have to kind of hit them on cycle, and you learn those. I don't know what they are. Somebody had mentioned it. I don't remember who. Oh, it was Ann Jones and her Muri. She said sometimes she can hit her program manager to the point where she'll respond, and then other times there's months in between emails. But so I don't know the answer. Sure, John.
Hi, this is John. Just a bit word about that. So the person you was, it's very true that once the RFA is out, the program officers don't want to talk about it. It's before the RFA comes out. So with CDMRP, the cycle is usually they're out in the spring, they close up in the fall. If you can get a jump start and talk to them later in the season, so in that September, October, November, December period, once they start saying, well, here's what we're going to do next year, they put out these pre-announcements and they'll let you know generally what the program is going to look like. That's still sort of an open space for discussion, but then once the RFA comes up, then they become scarce.
That's why I invited John. Thank you, Jonathan.
It'd be great if we
HSRS, all the program officers are walking around there, and if you can grab one, they might talk with you, and if they are interested in your poster or your presentation, they might come up to you and want to talk. So it's a very open, fluid environment there.
I was saying, you know, it'd be wonderful if we could get the contact information about some of these program officers, you know. I don't know how to contact them at all, you know, so, I mean, I would try to do this September to December if I knew who the contact.
I don't think, do they disclose? I mean, maybe they're like, they don't disclose. I've called the CDMRP multiple times. they don't disclose who are the directors and who's in programmatic review. Please correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
so I tried.
Yeah.
I tried too, and
There's a
there's
help-
no program director. There was no program manager for CDMRP program. They do have two program review panels. One is for scientific review panel, the other is for program review panel. Scientific review panel, I know about half of them because they talk. They are more domain. They're scholars. Whereas programmatic review panel have no idea because they are not scholarly domain. I don't know how to access or influence those programmatic review panels. I just don't.
But maybe this trip to DC would be the way to do it, that you guys pay for or whatever.
Yeah, well, that is what we're offering. So I personally haven't done it, and I actually don't know anybody who's done it. But one of the things that I can do is find out how Global Security Initiative does it.
I think one way I attended the panel in August for CDMRP. There were some of the programmatic review people were super. I mean, there was a big conference and they had just this lunch at the beginning of each panel. There were 11 panels running in parallel. So some of the SROs in the panel would say, this lady is in a programmatic review. If you want to go talk to her. Okay. So they mentioned, but just, I think it's higher than SRO level, that even sometimes they don't know what's happening at the higher level panel. Actually, it's very.
This is
I
why
would
we
say
have
this conference might be a good idea to go. Like this is perhaps the best connection.
Yes, that's why I was very excited to have apparently two people attend the conference, because I think it's one of the things that many universities do send someone to, and I would rather send faculty than myself to go and connect, because I think it's important for you guys to connect. But other universities have sent VPRs or AVPs in lieu of their faculty. But I would much rather make a statement. I have 6 abstracts that have been accepted, and I want you to go. I think if Jordan's on, Dr. Guerin over at Biodesign went, and he's research scientist, and I think he passed up the opportunity and sent a colleague. So he's still represented on the poster, but he was still representative in the poster, and so he got some contacts out of that. But no, I think from what I've understood from consultants and other universities, that the conference is kind of the way to go. If I'm wrong, John, I think John goes to the conference. I'm missing out.
Yep.
And he'll shut for faculty, or his research faculty, right? Flores, you want to talk about the conference? That's what I kind of, well, and the process of putting in a proposal, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to tell you what to talk about.
Of course. So I went to the conference last year, and I was sort of surprised by the setup. There are a lot of sessions, and you can go all the way, but there's not many social events as what we are used to as research scholars. So if you don't know the people, it's pretty difficult to understand where their interest lies, because there's not a focus group to go to and then meet people that are in the same area. So I had to sort of back and reset, and then I went into the program and just started looking for all the abstracts and all the people that were presenting something that were affiliated with organizations that I wanted to meet. And then I was just probing that and trying to reach out to those people. And before the end of the conference, I talked with some of them, and at least I made a connection, because we didn't have in my proposal. I was in the same type of proposal as the other gentleman. So that's the researcher initiated award, and then it was the partnering option. I partnered with a senior professor within college with a different type of expertise. It was funny because it was totally different, and still, because we're in the same college, they came and commented like, you both look like nutritionists, so maybe that's not the way we like it. So for the conference, I think it's helpful. It's it's nice. On the other hand, it's very, very broad, the scope. So let's say I had to look for the topics that I really found interesting. So if you go there, it's also because you try to create a network. And then the experience of submitting the proposal, we had initially a pretty hard job to define what fits best within the scope of the program. Of course, there are many programs, and I agree, it's very hard to find what is what. And it helped me that we had the consultants helping to find the connection with that research initiative award, and there my idea fit. The benefit of the proposal was sort of the 2 steps, so that gives you the option to think, because actually you need to move fast if you want to send in a letter. The letter is relatively short, so it gives you the chance to think further. On the other hand, when the announcement comes that you may submit for full, that comes 4 weeks before full. So we were constantly running to get everything in, because of course you have other stuff to do as well, and a lot of us will not write a specific proposal if you don't know if you can submit it for full. So that was something I found limiting. I like the 2-tier review. So there is a panel. What others told us about, we were scored in the panel pretty good. It was the scientific part that we had some additional work, but I've done a couple of submissions, and those 2 tiers, I really like it, especially when you have something that is very applicable to the field. Then that's something that helps you. It was something finicky. I'm not sure if you saw that, but if you submit this type of award for the co-investigator award, if you go into the portal, you cannot see what the other partner submitted. So for a couple of days, it was sort of unsure what was happening, if we had everything in time. And if you then call to the office on the other side, they were pretty lenient with the fact that, okay, maybe this needs to be approved or whatever. So the actual submission was stressful because we thought we had everything submitted. We had to approve the other side, and we didn't know exactly how. So that's something that I still don't know completely. So be prepared for that. And then it was taught about terminology. Mind yourself, just use service members, and you're always correct. Or when you have a targeted population, use them. But I didn't know anything about the service here in the US because I'm not from here. I learned a lot of that. They don't like to hear what they do wrong. That's what I got from the feedback all the time. So you really need, if you have something that you want to improve, you need to tell them how to improve, but without giving them the feeling that they are doing stuff not in the right way. And then, yeah, you try to find partnerships. And I started last year at this time, sort of a little bit earlier, tried to find partnership. It was very, very hard. Eventually, we submitted without an actual real DOD partner. So that's something to consider. You can submit just to go through the process and then resubmit again. But I honestly think that you need to have a very good idea to get it done without a partner.
So thank you. We are getting kicked out of our room because I wasn't paying attention. So for those of you who have extra questions at the end, feel free to chat outside the room because I want to be respectful for the people inside.
Well, quick question.
So well, it's not quick because I have to close the meeting. So because I want to be respectful. So can we
talk with John.
Okay. Well, why don't we send an email out, and if you want to talk to John, we can set up a separate meeting. Okay. thank you all for joining online. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the panelists and the quickness, the pace at which we did this. And thank you very much, John, for dialing in and presenting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.